This week on your old school RuneScape update, Game Jam continues with more POH customization options that are truly adored. We look at the collection log, an in-game bingo system, and submenus. Game Jam also spawned Project Rebalance, and we ask, has it met expectations, and will it have much of an impact when it launches? This is the Old School RuneScape Update, episode 26, recorded Saturday, May 4th, 2024. Community Courage. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. Sirion and myself are here, as we are each and every week, and this week, we're going to continue the discussions we were having last week on all things Game Jam, which I think is probably a good thing to do given the nature of where the team's at, given the nature of what's popped up on social media, and just in general, I think how impactful Game Jams can be. Yeah,
absolutely.
And, you know, you look at this and you say, well, what started as a Game Jam project? Well, there was once upon a time an update called Project Rebalance that started as a Game Jam project, believe it or not. So we're going to talk a bit about that a little bit later in the podcast. But if you want to follow along, full show notes can be found at update.show/OS. We have a Discord as well at update.show/Discord and a friends chat in-game, which is BitsBytes. You can find me in-game at Shane12088 if you ever want to message me, if you ever want to sling hate mail my way. I'm all for that. Either way, Sirion is also in game. His name starts with a C. When saying my name doesn't turn on the useless virtual assistant on my iPhone.
Yeah, please don't send me hate mail.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that before I got distracted by my device. That you can send me the hate mail, but don't send him that.
Yeah, I'm too sensitive.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
I need to be showered with compliments. It's the only way that I function.
And that's why you're on the internet looking, to do podcasts and whatnot, right?
Absolutely. Because everybody is always so nice and understanding on the internet. We always have mature and rational conversations. Even about controversial topics.
Yeah, well, you and I do. I don't know about everybody else, but let's just dive in this week to a bit of a Game Jam update from where we were with things last week, and I think it's very rightly so that we start with another look at the player-owned house customization update, because that got some more information dropped off with us this week, including some concept art for the Prif houses, as well as in-game examples of the Varlamore type setting and the Canifis Mort Meyer setting with this, and some other things too. You're the POH person here. How does this make you feel?
Yes, give me this. I had already sort of committed myself to doing the contracts to get access to the Assidious house style.
Yeah.
Because that's just the best looking. But I'm looking at these, I'm like, yes, I want the Prif one. I want the Varlamore one. I want all of these.
I must admit,
I think they're great.
Even in the concept for it, the Prif one looks amazing, and you can see that as being that's your reward for unlocking Prif, and doing something at the POH to get that, or doing something in Prif to get that.
It makes you want to get base 70 skills, doesn't it, Shane?
I'm working on it. I offered you the chance for me to know life for a week and get that within a week.
Yeah, but I'm too nice to ask for that.
For folks unaware, Song of the Elves is one of our long-term quest goals, and I'm missing a handful of level 70 skill requirements on that. So if I wanted to do my own Game Jam in terms of, just playing the game for a little while, that's what I could do. But no, we're going to talk about actual Game Jam content here with this. So since I'm not the POH person, I'm betting that the fourth image in this post on X here is just an example of what it looks like when you put up a painting or when you put up the trophy or some of the other things we talked about last week on the show. That's just a concept of what it looks like in game now.
Yeah, I
Like
expect so. I mean, I'm totally getting that shrimp trophy in my house just
what
for
would
the
that
fun
be
of
from?
It, right? Fishing.
Oh, okay. And we don't have unlock. We don't know what the unlocks requirements are going to be on any of these, or if they're just going to be available off the bat.
I love these, honestly. I think so many of these, makes me want to go and train like construction. So that's saying something, I think.
Yeah, and as I think I said before on the show, coming to Old School, I was just absolutely amazed at the amount of time and the amount of energy that goes into player-owned house things here, and that it's been fostered and it's been nurtured to the point where if you look at the House Party World 330, I think it is, or is it 430, 330 or 430, something to that effect. That's almost always full with people using POHs and visiting others for the various utilities involved. So we like construction. Number
Absolutely.
2, an update on the collection log work. This time it looks to be largely movable, resizable, and some UI enhancements along the way with this. And Mod Husky, who is behind this one, also is said that he's done more work on the book stuff that we talked about last week in terms of the customization with the stabs and whatnot. So I didn't really feel like there was much else to say about this one, but it's just nice to see the UI really progressing on this one.
Yeah,
compared to where we were at before. But you and I were having a bit of a discussion about whether things like collection logs inherently lean into things like completionism and whatnot. And, I feel like this is just putting this here for people who want to go for it. And it's not as though it's, your next chapter after you get all 99s or something to that effect. It's just there if you kind of want to have it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel it's much less almost intrusive, I want to use as a word. It feels like there's no comp cape with benefits at the end of all of this. It's just bragging rights in a sense. And that's all it needs to be.
Yeah, you've completed it, and here's a little something to show that you did.
Exactly. Like, I have been tempted, I guess is the right word, to go and get the Comcape in RS3, but like, and maybe that's in part attributable or can be attributed to the fact that I'm not quite as high level in our Old School as I am in RS3, but still it's
you're
much
looking
less
for something
heavy-handed.
to do, and you feel like you're kind of funneled in that way.
Yeah.
On RS3, whereas we were looking at at this when you look at a collection log like this when it comes to bosses, raids, clues, mini games, and what have you. It's not something you absolutely need to do. It's just there to kind of track your progress along the way. And I suppose there is a future where the game gets to a point where people have done almost everything else and they don't want to move off their main character, that then they do lean into collection logs for these sorts of things.
Yeah,
but we're a long way from that.
Look, and I also think the fact that collection logs are just so almost unattainable, right? Like if you look, you need to get all of the drops from like clues. That's a lot of clues. And then you need to also get all of the drops from like really hard bosses. Someone that wants to do both of these needs to have such a varied way of playing. Whereas if they were to start, I can't do words today, curating this and trying to be like, oh, this is reasonable for an average player to do, then you start to come to a point where the expectation exists.
Right. And that's the difference, is the expectation that people do it to the point that it just be something that you
Yeah.
can look at after you've done, 1,000 clue scrolls, for example, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think it's just like, for me, I find it hard to explain, and I'm probably not doing it very well, but the collection log just, it's not there, right? It's not hanging there as this is the thing you need to focus on.
yeah.
Maybe it will become that after
That's my
getting the quest
concern.
cape and achievements,
Yeah.
but
And maybe that's just the RS3 side of me, seeing that and wondering if the old school community will feel that way, if people who are engaging with this collection log, should it make its way into the game, will feel that way. And, I think that's a question I'd like to extend out to the listeners if anybody wants to answer it, is that if you are if you see something like a collection log put in front of you and you've, maxed out your character, do you feel compelled to complete that? That's my question for anybody who, is higher leveled. Is this something that compels you to do more, or is it just a nice thing to have? And if you want to see what the prototype for this looks like, it's linked over in the show notes at update.show/os, and it is a GIF that's posted on X with that. So next, bingo. Official support for bingo.
This is interesting. This goes back to, like, in our clan, we do like a bunch of events. Like, we've had things like Clue Bingo before, and PVM Bingo, where basically people need to post screenshots of getting certain drops in a certain period of time, and then try and fulfill the card as much as possible. Personally, something I've toyed with as an idea is basically like a race format, almost a speedrun format, where basically a brand new account needs to get like 10 unique items as quickly as possible, which sort of unlocks interesting strategies. And I think speedrunning in is part of it, right? Like, trying to think ahead and, like, what do you need? I think the bingo system sits in the middle. You could do very different things, I think.
Like the show, you being able to set a goal for XP, somebody getting 10 woodcutting XP, or 1,000,000 runecrafting XP, or boss drops, or clue drops. It's all in here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I would hope that acquiring an item becomes part of it, because I think that's where the interesting things come along.
It
right?
is part of it.
Like,
one of the examples given is that you could get a certain boss drop from Cerberus.
well, yeah, but I don't need like a boss drop. I just mean like acquiring a given item in any way. Like get yourself a rune crossbow, and then people could choose whether they want to get it as a drop from the crazy archaeologist, or make it themselves, or get the limbs and all that stuff, right? Like, that to me would be interesting, especially if you do it from the, like, at that point you can almost make it leagues like, in a
so
sense,
basically you run your own competition for a month and say, everybody, you're starting up a new hardcore Iron Man character, or even just Iron Man character, and you're working to see whoever can get the most items out of this bingo card.
Yeah, but like, I think it goes to show how versatile this system could be.
Yeah,
it could just be a clue bingo, but it could also
be the next YouTube series.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
like, imagine like an entire YouTube series by a content creator built around this, right? Where the card gets, or it could be a race, right? Like, even like, sure, 1,000,000 runecraft XP is a lot, but isn't it interesting that there are so many different ways to go about it? Like, maybe if 1,000,000 is a lot, but like 200k, are you gonna go and do Guardians of the Rift? Are you gonna go and do something else?
Mm-hmm. And then you could have a myriad of other things on there. You could have 100k, you could have 200k, you could have 500k. throw in some other skills, throw in a few item drops, and then you have your clans or your community's next month's worth of event with that.
Yeah.
And I also want to piggyback on something that you said in pre-show or last night, is that this feels like an actual true Game Jam project, because normally these are the kind of things that you wouldn't see in other content kind of updates.
Yeah, who would think of this making like as part of a content strategy? This update makes almost no sense, I think.
Yeah,
and that's the great thing about game jams,
right? And the one thing I'm not 100% up on the OS side compared to the RS3 side is, what's the amount of production work and the average time length that an update is in the oven, so to speak, from start to finish on this. So basically what I'm getting at is that how hard is it for Modelina, who is behind this Game Jam project, to make the case to the producers on the old school team that this is something that should be given the green light to take those 3 steps forward to become an official game update with that. That's the thing I'd like to know on this. And I'm wondering how popular this piece is going to be. According to the analytics here on this post, it's already been seen 102,000 times. So that just shows how wide this community is. And maybe there will be some noise behind it. But I like the bingo one. We didn't have this last week. The next one that we didn't have last week, that's a bit of an interesting one, and I know there's going to be some mixed feeling on, comes from Mod Kieran and Mod Lycos and Mod Lenny. It's sub-menu items, which, like I said, you're either going to like this or you're going to say, please don't add sub-menu items to my game. But I think it's needed for some places.
Yeah, that's really the thing, right? Like, if you look at certain items, like, it's kind of shitty that, especially when you wear certain items, or like teleport items when they're in your inventory are worse, right? Because you can't directly go to destination, and it's always like it opens like a chat box or like one of these windows, and then you need to select your destination. It just doesn't feel great, and that will continue working. But at least this sort of allows you to solve it with a single click.
Yeah.
Do I like his solution? No, but I can't think of something better either.
Right. And I think another thing that people are pleased with this, and that at least I've seen, is that if this were to come into game, there is now the option to move the use option on a per item basis, meaning that it's not going to be at the top or in the middle of other useful features. So they'll be able to choose where exactly the use item or the use menu item lands, which we're kind of heading into RuneLite territory with that, and that has me wondering, is there a sub-menu plugin on RuneLite? And I haven't looked at that, but given the fact we could reorder menu options there already, maybe? I don't know.
I'm not sure, actually, yeah.
But I feel like, and this will be the last thing I say on this, is that it looks as though it's something that, we might not want in game. But the reality of it is no matter whether, you're using Windows or some variant of Linux or Mac OS, you know what a submenu is. So as soon as you see the little arrow next to it and the thing pop up when you mouse over it, it's going to be no problem using it. And it's something that everybody's going to adapt to relatively quickly if it arrives. And I guess that's just one of the benefits of, working inside old school, is that the game is, simple enough that you can make changes to the UI like this. You don't need to, be tied to a very rigid system. But that's the Game Jam update for this week. And as we kind of alluded to at the top of the show, there was the question of Project Rebalance and how that got started. And we were sitting doing our quest this week, and I was like, Sirion, what do you want to talk about in addition to these Game Jam updates this week? And you're like, well, let's talk about the origins of Project Rebalance. So what gave you this idea in your head?
I don't know. I think Project Rebalance has been living in my head rent free basically over the past few weeks. It's such a big deal, I feel, that we are getting this right now. But to me personally, it also came with a lot of expectations and a lot of hope for, like, hopefully they will fix this and that, because
That's a big word, expectations and player base.
and I think, yeah, like for me, when we first talked about this back in December when we were still playing leagues, feels like ages ago. We were talking that this might be the biggest thing that happens in 2024. And now that we kind of know what's going to come, right? We've gone through the feedback rounds, and from what I can tell, at the end of this month, what's there will just ship. I think this is a natural moment to look back and be like, okay, is this everything we expected? Is it more? Is it less?
Yeah. And
I've sort of tried to discover how I feel about it, because I don't know how I feel about it.
so the interesting bit about this started as a Game Jam project in October of 2023. Mods Arcane, Halo, Husky, and Kieran, three of which we've talked about in our previous Game Jams update. And the goal of this, they said, was to look at how they'd improve older content, and in particular, healthy changes that could be made to help make the game feel more rounded, from skills to equipment and even changes to certain NPCs. Now, they didn't get into the details back in October, but based on how these people are, how these JMods are, they knew exactly probably what they wanted to do in their head, minus the numbers side of it. And, lo and behold, they start this off by mentioning the Scythe of Vitter and Osmumton's Fang, amongst other things. But we know that the bulk of this discussion about Project Rebalance, I think, has centered on combat. I feel like combat has been the big thing that came forward with this. We can talk about, the skilling stuff in a bit, because I know I want to touch on a couple of the skilling things. But I feel like combat is always a subject where everybody puts on, their slippers and walks over the eggshells, right?
Yeah.
Rightly so, maybe not rightly so, I don't know. Is this, should I say this word, is this old school's version of attempting to do something relating to evolving combat without trying to do what the other game did?
I mean, the overview post that we got back in December very much states, and I quote, "We're not looking to evolve combat. We're looking to create new avenues for rewards and give people a reason to use gear that's super cool, but often just sits in the bank gathering dust."
Which is not changing the core fundamentals of combat, but I feel like some of the discussions I saw on some of the Project Rebalance things were kind of venturing in that area, where people felt like, or said, hey, this is changing too much, and we feel like that the identity of how we like to do combat is changing on this. And I feel like that's why there has been, even just looking back at our show, there's been, 3-ish weeks of back and forth on combat related things, from magic to various rebalancing and to the way, accuracy and defense works. With all that, when it comes to the min and max hits, you get to a point where, people will say that, oh, maybe it is a chance to evolve combat. But to get back to it, I don't think the core of combat is changing with this. And I will say, from my perspective, as a mid-level player, I think these combat changes are good. Like I said a few weeks back, I like the extra power this magic stuff is going to give me. And I realize it sounds as though that there's lots of power on the surface, but if you look at the number of creatures out there who are going to have this elemental weakness on it compared to all of the NPCs in the game that you can kill, it's a portion of them, a small portion of them. So I'm not too concerned about that. And it just makes, it feel better to use the standard spellbook in places when you look at that side of it, at least. And it also goes to the other, combat gear changes, an avenue for horizontal progression, which I think MMOs need a lot more of to keep people engaged and playing for a long time.
But how much is really changing? That's sort of my question. Like, we were talking about defense changes. How much is really changing?
Not much at all. But it's just
we get elemental weakness. That's a pretty big change, and we split ranged into 3 styles, except for almost every monster will have the same defense against all 3. How much really changed, right? Like, I feel
like this is, when you put it in that way, this is the classic case of, you're delivering an update, but you got your few unique key selling points, namely elemental weakness and the min hit changes on the combat style and spreading some things out horizontally. I feel like that's going to be the bulk of it, but like you say, everything else aside from that is smaller in scope and just little, pushes around the edges to kind of, massage things into a right spot.
Yeah, but isn't that, like, to me that feels a little bit disappointing, right? Like, if you look at the original post, like, it says sort of, they do want to rebalance things, right? They do want NPC defense changes. I mean, we got changes, but I feel NPC defense changes more than that, right? Like, that's sort of, I think that's sort of the angle I'm missing. I see it as a lot of smaller incremental changes and not looking at the problem as a whole, and maybe that is too much. Maybe we'll never get that, but I don't know. Like,
and it comes to your expectations then.
Yeah, maybe. Look, that's sort of the disappointing side of me. On the other side, I think we got a lot more than we bargained for with, like, the damage redistribution in Magic.
Yeah.
We got changes to, like, Slayer and Thieving, which I don't think are even mentioned in this original. Oh, yeah, they are, but, like, as, like, a section sort of together. And I think if you look at the redistribution of Agility XP, we got
that was also
more
controversial.
Yeah, that was also controversial, but we got there in the end.
Because it destroyed people's, idea of what the meta should be. And show me another game outside RuneScape that just wouldn't make the change and listen to the community to that point. Literally, show me another game that would go to the extent that Old School did to, keep people happy. But
yeah, I think ultimately it's not like I don't feel I've been
swindled.
Exactly. Like, I don't feel I've been lied to. I think if you look back even at the earliest posts, they never said anything false. At the same time, I don't know. Like, I feel, to me, it feels like a drip on, like, a hot plate, right? Like, it
Right, because they wrote 6 paragraphs about NPC defense changes. And the reason I fixated on that one when this first post came out, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, is because I feel like accuracy and defense is the bane to doing combat effectively.
Yeah, but that's not changing, right? Like, that's
it's not.
Like, the whole discussion we had is that the frustrating bit, I don't think that's changing. You'll be hitting a few fewer zeros, especially as low level, but, like, it's not gonna massively change how you play the game, I think. Right? Like, that's one of the things with ranged, for example. The reason they need to give you such a massive accuracy bonus in leagues to make, like, ranged a viable style, it, like, shows the fundamental flawedness of that combat style.
Yeah, and I don't think that's being fixed here.
No, and that's why I'm saying that and again, you say you're right. It comes to expectations and like progress over perfection. Like I don't think any of the changes we're gonna get are bad, but I'm left wondering: are we ever gonna see something bigger, something more? I'm.
Are
Oh
you
no,
asking
Project
for? Are
Rebalance.
you
No, no, no.
asking for EOC for old school?
No, 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 no. What I'm
I
saying
can't.
is Project Rebalance is so good. It's left me hungering for more. I want more of this. How do I get more of this good stuff?
Okay. That's a fair perspective. And I don't know if that's the majority opinion. I feel like the majority opinion is that, make a few things that are a little bit cumbersome, easier to work around, but don't necessarily change the core identity of my game.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the mood of the community with this in general right now. So.
And one thing that I'm left to wonder as well is like, because a lot of the stuff they toned down from their original proposals.
Oh
how
boy,
much
did
of that? Yeah. It's like, how much of our expectations would have held true if the community hadn't complained? That's another thing that sort of keeps floating in my head. Right, is it our own fault that we're not getting this grand Project Rebalance?
That's a spicy take.
It's not a take, it's a question, though.
Oh, you said I thought you said this is our own fault that we're not getting this, not is. Okay.
I mean, is it? Like, I mean, not fully. Jags could
No,
have
of
said,
course not. It's
screw
never the
all of you,
player's
we're
fault.
shipping this anyway because it's the right thing to do. And they do not, and that might be the right choice. That might not be the right choice. I find it hard to say.
Here's a question for you before we move on to the skilling side, and maybe we can use this to springboard into the skilling side of things, because we do want to talk about some of the skilling things that came to pass and did not come to pass. How risk averse do you think the old school team is?
I mean, I think quite. Like, ironically, I think conservatism is the power of old school in a sense, right? Because it is so nostalgia driven. So, I think, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I think erring on the side of keeping things the same is typically the right thing to do.
I've met players who have wanted it to not move beyond the time capsule of what it was when it launched.
Look, I don't think
I've
that is
also
a good
met
thing.
players who feel that there are certain updates in game that aren't within that spirit. So it's a spectrum and there's varying degrees. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're never going to make everyone happy. There's going to be people that want the game to move faster, and there's going to be people that want the game to move slower. And if there's a roughly an equal number of both of them, you're doing a pretty good job of like balancing that balance. And I think the old school team does do a good job. I wish sometimes that things would move faster. And look, I think a lot of that gets solved by plugins. I think not on the gameplay wise, like gameplay will be jank in many ways, but the community has a lot of power to make things better.
Like like the thing from a couple weeks back with construction.
Exactly. So
plugins.
That really allows people to move further forward than the rest of the community. It allows sort of a separation within the community. And I think that's a positive thing, and I think that speaks for and that's one of the reasons that old school has hung around for so long. Right? Like if you compare this to RS3, that's a train that's going, and you can't, like, if you don't like the speed it's going at, you can get off, but that's your only choice. Whereas I feel in old school, you can, I mean, there's sort of a minimum speed, but you can sort of jump ahead by using plugins and get at least some of the experience of what a quote unquote more modern game would be.
Yeah, and see that's actually a fun idea when you think about it. What plugins are needed on the RuneLite level to make that modern experience? Ooh, that's an interesting idea for an episode. I'm gonna write that down.
But like, and it's interesting because I think what helps with the plugins is that it normalizes it, right? And you see
Yeah.
that some of the features have come to the new C++ client. And we're now getting to a point where the C++ client is going to get their own plugins and it's going to, I think move the entire ecosystem of the game further forward.
Yeah, and on that I feel like when you look at the new client, that new client is either going to sink or swim based on its plugin support.
I think so. Yeah, I think so for sure. Like I think the biggest benefit that this new client has is that it is used on mobile.
Yes.
And that is the only thing that can be used on mobile. I think that's the thing it has got going for it. But we'll see. So
when the beta of it first came out, it was absolutely horrible. It's gotten better over time, but I still use RuneLite stuff. But I do want to kind of bring this back to the Project Rebalance because we did want to talk about Run Energy. And that was something that was mentioned with this, and they said it was worked on in the November 2022 game jam, and in particular how weight and agility would affect this. And I feel like this is one of the things in terms of Project Rebalance that's going to ship that's pretty much maintaining the status quo.
Like they're not touching it, right? Whereas, and this is where a lot of the discussion came from. If you look at the overview post, Run Energy is actually one of the topics mentioned, but it's not actually touched upon because it's too big of a topic. It needs its own separate pass, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that I have been able to catch Jagex on as being something that they sort of really came back from and stopped doing. And that's in part where the confusion came from.
Well, I also see it as an exercise in pacing and leading. As in, to find out where your community's at, you put out 2 paragraphs on Run Energy in the Project Rebalance overview, and you see what the initial reactions to that are. And if they're positive, you lean into that and do more. But if they're not so positive, maybe you do something else instead. And I feel like with everything I've learned and everything I've learned about the agility ecosystem when it comes to running and weight, since I've started old school, I can kind of see where the community's at on this. But I do still agree that something should be done on Run Energy.
I think, if anything, League showed me that Run Energy is not necessary as a mechanic.
Yeah, and, that's the thing. You can't just, go in and remove that from the game and effectively take the RS3 path of letting everybody run infinitely. I think I think it would be a good thing to do, but there is that section of the old school player base who's just going to say no. And the question... And see, there we get back into the whole risk-averse thing. That's not what the game was founded on. I would like to be able to say that, to, just move past it, but I don't think they're willing to. And I don't think it would pass a poll. And maybe that's the downside of old school, is that the community holds the game back in places like that.
Yeah, it's interesting where it's going to go. I mean, to be honest, I haven't found Run Energy to be a big issue anymore. Now that I have Blue Graceful on a pretty high agility level, it's fine. But playing on like my free-to-play Iron Man, it's absolutely horrendous. It's horrible. It just slows down the game for no good reason.
And see, that's the thing, is that the people who don't want it to change are the ones who have full Graceful, who can use stamina potions when they need to, who can use the energy potions when they need to, and understand how the system works. And that's the majority, versus people who are just getting into the game and being hamstrung by it. And I think that's the kicker with this. So
I mean, hot take then, we should make, next time doing leagues, you should make Run Energy just even more punishing and see how people feel about that.
That would be an interesting thing to do. And that's, see what people prefer.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean about how, in this perspective, the community can't hold things back then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always been one of my things with old school. But we're neither here nor there. What about the thing that only got one line in the initial post? Rebalancing XP and fail rates at various NPCs to better position them within thieving progression.
Yeah, I think we are lucky that we got as much as we wanted on that. I think that's great. I think thieving could use even more work, but it's a good starting point. I'm happy with how much attention that got. I think mining could have gotten a little bit more attention.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you think about the context in which this Project Rebalance overview blog came out. That was right of the million iterations of falling stars, shooting stars rather, where there were just huge problems with people jumping onto worlds, right? Because it was the only way to train mining in a not so horrendous way. And that's how we ended with the shooting star system that we have today. But it shows that mining is fundamentally flawed, and that really didn't get fixed, right? Like,
no,
none of the core mining has been touched. We have only really touched like model load mine and blast mine and some of those.
And see, the only reason I think that's okay is because there's other activities to allow you to work around that.
I don't know. I think if I don't mind so much, but if the core part of the skill becomes so completely obsolete, I think that's problematic, right? Like, the fact that normal mining is so rarely done, is to me a problem.
Right.
Smithing, I still see a path to do smithing at an anvil and smelting cannonballs, right? Runecraft, there's still like going blood rune crafting in Arceus, for example, right? Like, all of these, the core training methods have remained relevant in one way or another. Whereas in mining, I feel it's not. I think the core skill is broken.
And the question is, can there be a push to change that?
And
I
think Herblore suffers from a similar fate, right? Like, Rumors brought some life back in the core skill, but it shows how flawed the core
you said
skill
Herblore,
is.
you mean Hunter?
Hunter, yes. Sorry, they both start with an H. Yes. Everybody just does birdhouses and maybe the underwater drift net.
Yeah.
What does it say about a skill?
And what does it say necessarily too about the community and the game if we're not able to move past that? I'm not saying it's the community's fault. Jagex, of course, has to put out compelling options for people to vote in and want, but it's an interesting thing to think about just in the back of your head. So it raises a ton of questions, and when you look at this, you wonder, what's the future hold for this, and is this the extent of balancing that we're going to see, unless something like you say rather, is hilariously broken. And it's a question of how long can you sustain that for. But in any case,
at some point, the Band-Aid is not going to be able to keep things together.
That's a good way to put it, and I think that's really the crux of what Project Rebalance should have tried to solve, and we'll leave it up to the players once that arrives to see if it's gone far enough. So, all right, what have you been up to on RS this week?
Not much. I had a bad week at work, so that left me very drained. But I did get some of my goals done. Luckily. I finally I got I spent a bunch of money on gear upgrades that I wanted, so I got a Berserker ring.
More
money, always more money.
No, I mean more gear.
Yeah, more gear. There's like, I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm running. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I still have things I want to buy. The list is getting shorter, but the things are also getting more expensive. So,
Okay, fair.
but yeah, I got Lightbearer, which is a great item for a certain skilling. Lightbearer, in case you don't know, halves or doubles the recovery rate of special attack energy.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, so it allows you to use the skilling boost from like the Dragon Hatchet and the Dragon Pickaxe twice as often, which is great. Got myself the Berserker Ring, so that's a nice boost for melee. And I got 70 cooking, which is another skill knocked out for the Questscape.
Nicely
That
done.
that leaves me at just 5 of them left: Magic, Slayer, Thieving, Woodcutting, and Firemaking. The Woodcutting is only 1 level, so I'm kind of just
You'll do that whenever.
I'm just going to Winter Toad at some point, and I'm going to get some passive woodcutting XP, and it's going to get me over the
Right,
edge.
because you got to do fire making as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, quite a few. That's the biggest chunk of work left. That's 15 levels I need to get in that skill, from 60 to 75. So that might be the biggest chunk. The other ones, I mean, it's 1 woodcutting level. It's 60 to 70 thieving, I think. 72 if you consider while Gothic sleeps. So that's doable, I think, especially with the new thieving method in Civis.
Oh boy,
Civitas.
is it doable with that.
Then Slayer is from 61 to 69, so that's not great. But
You
that's where
tell me
most
how
of the
that
lamp...
goes after you do that, and then I'll.
That's where most of the lamps are gonna go, I think, very soon. So we'll see how far that gets me. Probably not very far.
No,
But...
because it's not like a plentiful training method to the point where it can supplement the main training method. So, I mean, it's going to be something, but you're still going to need to, go into the Slayer Cave probably, and head to various places.
Yeah, exactly.
Out west.
And then Magic is 72 to 75. So that's it. All but Firemaking and Slayer are very, very achievable, I think, and attainable. So those are going to be a little bit more grindy, but I'm not so concerned about it. Winter Toad should be okay for doing that a while. Hopefully get the full Pyromancer's outfit in the process.
And you won't be getting 99 in the afternoon like you did on Leagues.
No, that's unfortunate. That was very pleasant. But yeah, I think my biggest worry for finishing all the quests will be my combat stats. Like the highest recommended combat level is 100.
That's Desert Treasure 2, right?
Yeah, so I'm still 10 combat levels off that, and that's getting slower and slower. So definitely want to get base 80s across the board on my combat level. That gets me around that level. So that will still take some time, but together with having to imbue a bunch of things like rings and Slayer Helmet, I think Nightmare Zone is gonna get a lot of visit from me.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing, is that when you're at this point, like I talked about earlier on, when it comes to the combat stuff, your biggest worry is that you go into a boss fight and you're there and you hit 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and you run out of resources just because things take so long to kill. And at that point, you might as well leave and just go get a few more levels, I think. And it's just a question of making sure you have enough.
Killing Jad has definitely sort of risen the confidence I have in being able to do harder boss fights for me. I mean, Barrows and Wounds of Peril, like I can do all of these, so I think most quest bosses will be fine. I think the quests that really concern me are, of course, the raids ones, where you need to finish a raid. Though from what I can tell, they're, reasonably doable if you just take your time.
Yeah.
And
because I don't think they'd lock a quest behind something truly insane like that. So
yeah, and then there's of course Desert Treasure 2 and Song of the Elves. I think those, and to some extent Dragon Slayer 2. Those quests sort of concern me, but
well, to be fair, you remember Dave, who was on a few weeks back for the Varlamore stuff, right?
mm-hmm.
He got his quest cape with 92 combat.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll be overleveled in that context, and I'd rather be like a little bit more prepared and have an easier time.
Yeah, just like me, how I like looking at things and have them die, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's going to be my goal. I've not been doing a lot of combat in the last week because I was sort of winding down from the Fire Cape grind, but I've got a long weekend coming up next week. So I'm looking forward to getting in a mix of Winter Toad and combat, and maybe get a big start on doing some members quests on my Iron Man if I feel like doing something else and mixing things up.
Spicy. Well, I mentioned that, boy, is thieving possible with the new Varlamore burglary system. I just wanted to knock that one out and get that out of the way because when I looked at the quest cape requirement list, I saw thieving 70, soon to be 72 with Welgothic Sleeps, and Slayer at 69, two of the biggest bottlenecks that I was going to run into. So I just knocked that thieving one out and I got 72 thieving this week. It was actually really chill with the new Varlamore stuff. And I would take that pace over blackjacking any day. I will say that. It's a little bit slower, of course, but after you get the keys and whatnot, it's just so smooth to the point where you could even be watching something and doing it at the same time. I do recommend, of course, that you have audio on because there's a little audio cue, a whistle that the kid makes outside the windows when the homeowner's coming back, and that tells you it's time to get out. But
well, did you come across any other people doing it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Pretty much whenever I was there was always another person doing it, at least with me.
Yeah, I kind of wish they made a dedicated world for it. I think it would be a great social activity and have people sort of be there together in the same house all the time. All run through the window when whistling.
and I mean, it's not squirking, right? So it's not that level of community where it would break Varlamore or anything. But yeah, I agree.
No, exactly.
That'd be a fun thing to have on that. And also this week, I'm a bit behind you in terms of the levels. I started.
A bit?
Yes. I mean, you can let folks look us up. Shane12088, Sirion, Cireon. Look us up, compare the levels, and you can, determine where we're at on that. But I just started the fishing venture to 62. And did you do any 3-tick fishing or wood cutting?
No, God, no.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I'm not going to that extent, I don't think.
I have yet to check out Temporos as a fishing training method.
Are we casuals because we don't want a 3-tick?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have put me in the casual thing a few weeks back, and now I'm flinching. That felt very pro to me. So, no, we're absolutely casuals, I think, and. I mean, I've always considered myself a casual player, and I'm just fine with that. To me, that's the way. That's the way to play the game.
And that's what out that way. Right, and that's what I aim for with the RS3 show. Is that I always say, and we don't necessarily know our audience as well yet on Old School here, but on the RS3 side, we always target our show for the average RuneScape player, and I feel like we're kind of headed in that direction too, starting the show at mid-level, so to speak, and sharing that. Along the way with that. But questing wise, we did Mountain Daughter this week. I started off complaining during this one because it felt like it was going to be a fetch quest, but I feel like it ended okay in the end. In terms of where it landed, in terms of, oh boy, how did this age, you think? How did Mountain Daughter age?
I didn't mind it so much, honestly. No, it sort of worked, I think. Like you didn't need that many items. Most of the items you'll probably have in the bank.
Or you could acquire
There was
during
a
the
little bit.
quest.
Hmm?
Or you could acquire a few of them during the quest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a few teleporting around and running around, but not actually that much. Like the only real place outside of the province you have to go is White Wolf Mountain. And look, the Fremenic province is a little bit of a pain to get around because of the lack of teleports, but it honestly was pretty fine. I had a good time. I think it's a fun story. I think it's a story about normal people having normal problems.
Yeah, and see that's the thing. You go into these Fremenic quests and they are good at, kind of showing that and just being, I guess what you would say, it honestly feels like a quest I would run into in ESO, Elder Scrolls Online.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit.
What it really did for me, because I had never really done this quest understanding so the lore behind it.
Oh.
It really, yeah, like for me, it really made like that region a little bit richer. Like the fact that, they left, they don't really agree with the council. And I think that having some politics and dynamic going on there makes that region of the world come alive a little bit more. So I really appreciate that.
And for folks unaware,
about the
you
quest.
started RuneScape when you were still learning English, and so some of the comprehension of these quests back when you would have done them back in the day, when this was the version of the game, probably just didn't sink in.
I used Dutch quest guides basically, and they would really just tell you what to do, and they might tell you a little bit about the story, but yeah, I missed a lot of that. So for me, going through a bunch of these quests is like the first time I actually go through them, reading through the dialogue and then understanding what's going on. So in that respect, I sort of appreciated this quest. It doesn't really move like a big story forward. It just adds a little bit of authenticity to the world.
Yeah. In terms of what it gets for us, it opens up the Fremenic Exiles soon. And
I wanted the Kendo in the Nightmare Zone.
And the Kendo,
yeah, exactly.
So, that's the reason we did this now. And, if time were more of a thing, I think we were talking that, we'd lean into more, like the pirates, the Myrek stuff, because we really haven't done any of those storylines, and we should at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's been the week, folks. That's been what we've been up to in old school RuneScape. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. A little bit different, a little bit of a discussion on a certain topic, tangential to the Game Jam updates that we had this week. Of course, do let us know what you think. We're always open to comments, whether that be on YouTube or in the Discord at update.show. And you can subscribe if you want the podcast delivered automatically to you. Of course, audio is the primary version, both on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Pocket Casts, update.show/OS, and of course YouTube as well, youtube.com/@OSRS update. Anything before we go for next week?
I hope we get a news post again next week. I am very appreciative of the Game Jam, but I miss the great content.
Hey, if anything, we'll have poll results to talk about for the Varlamore Herblore activity, because that's being polled now, so go vote at that if you haven't.
Yeah, I have.
Right on. Me too. I voted yes on everything. You?
Yes, same.
Right on. Alrighty, folks. Well, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. Until then, take care. See you then.
Bye.